Listen, for the uninitiated, some of these videos take a while to get going. I'm so sorry.
In 1989, a sex researcher named Ray Blanchard published a controversial, provocative, politically incorrect theory claiming that trans women are not, as custom has it, essentially female souls accidentally born into male bodies. Instead, he claimed, they are men of two types, gay men who love straight men, and straight men who love themselves. For the latter condition, Blanchard coined the term autogynephilia, New Greek for love of...
I don't know if she's trying to present the first one as like the correct opinion, because surely I don't think she actually thinks that. I don't know. Confusing sometimes. But then she kind of suggested all that kind of thing was like metaphorical language. And that was in a gender critical video, which came out decently long after this one. This is February 2018. So I'm not sure. I guess I can see why people would tend to see her as kind of hiding her power level. I think I've always been very like charitable, because maybe just because I was a huge fan of ContraPoints when I was younger, and I like agreed with literally everything she said, you know. And nowadays it's more like hit and miss. But she's still one of the only trans creators I like, so I don't know. There's some, but none of them are in this genre. They're usually quite critical of like trans shit.
Of oneself as a woman. It's a theory that contradicts what almost all trans women say and believe about themselves, and affirms the common prejudice that trans people are really just sex perverts, which, okay.
Wait, hang on.
One, just what the hell do I think I'm doing?
I mean, this is ContraPoints. I mean, everyone was fucking ripping her off pretty much afterwards, and BreadTube is pretty much her fault, so. Her and H-Bomber guy.
Rest assured, in this video I am going to argue that Blanchard's theory is false.
Yeah, rest assured. Don't worry, guys. Don't worry, folks. We're going to say it's bad. You're going to say it's bad. Don't worry. You're not going to get upset by me suggesting that there might be any merit to this whatsoever.
But a lot of trans women are probably nervously wondering why I'm using my platform. Listen,
I'm so glad I'm choosing not to give a fuck about this kind of shit. If like people are that upset about what I use my platform for, they don't have to fucking watch me, you know?
To potentially increase awareness of a sinister fringe theory that only adds to the stigma we all already face. After all,
okay, so she's describing it as they're saying it. Fair enough.
Autogynephilia gives scientific legitimacy to our culture's most twisted misrepresentations of trans women.
Who do you fuck with?
So it's understandable that to a lot of trans women,
gay has reached peak acceptability because of all the non-binary queer theory shit. Yeah, actually, to be honest, I think the acceptance of like trans and all the other pluses and all that, I think quite a lot of it was to do with when they started pushing like the kids stuff, and when the sports stuff kept coming back up. Like the pride stuff, I think, as well as a thing. And then like for more online people, we had like the Hogwarts Legacy boycott, where we were pretty much trying to make out that anyone who consumes certain kinds of media is like a terrible transphobe and stuff. I think those were like the biggest things that started pulling the ship down, and it's gonna come crashing down. It's not gonna happen straight away.
The prospect of this concept gaining cultural traction is pretty terrifying. However, I respond to that as one of YouTube's leading B-list transsexuals. I've had several conversations with academics and journalists where it becomes clear that they believe in Blanchard's theory, even if the cowards won't admit it to my face. So, as I see it, the damage is already done. What's needed now is an accessible, convincing refutation of the theory. I hope this video will accomplish 3 things. 1. Persuasively argue that the wrong theory is wrong. 2. Account for how a wrong theory became so influential. And 3.
I'm very worried that we're going to get it explained completely differently to how someone like Ray Alex Williams has.
3. Move beyond some of the platitudes about trans people and open up a deeper discussion about what it really means to be transgender. Socrates, you know the drill. 2. Blanchard's typology. The mainstream scientific view, endorsed by the World Professional Association for Transgender Health, the DSM.
Oof, Natalie. At two, Natalie. Listen, maybe it wasn't as sinister back then. Maybe I'm coping for a trans creator that I used to like. I don't know. Oh, you have to be nice to ContraPoints. I'm sorry. I don't know. Anyway. Yeah, well, WPath. I don't know what WPath's reputation was like in 2018. Yeah, this either has aged horribly or she was maybe in on it more than I thought. Because my impression was always that she kind of regretted the way things went. And often because, you know, stuff like this comes into the videos. You hear this kind of shit constantly. You know what I'm saying? So, like, yeah, it seems like people took the wrong arguments from ContraPoints when there was also good ones, but I don't know. I don't know how ultimately, like, deep embedded in the culty shit she is, because it's always seemed like one foot in and one foot out.
DSM-5 and most practicing clinicians is that the primary reason trans people transition is to alleviate gender dysphoria. Gender dysphoria is a state of social, emotional,
Which we have to accept is like just a theory.
Anatomical, sexual, spiritual, and sartorial angst relating to one's assigned birth sex, which is mostly relieved by socially and medically transitioning to the gender of one's psychological identity. This is what motivated me to transition, and I endorse the mainstream scientific view. However, sex researcher Blanchard has a different theory.
Yeah, and don't forget, the mainstream scientific view in 2018 is rather different than now. I'm on Contra. The inch is so close to the truth. Yeah, the thing is, with ContraPoints, she's one of those people that, like, it's hard to tell whether she was, like, really captured or whether a lot of this was more honest and, like, a lot of the arguments got kind of taken and used for other shit, if that makes sense. Because she seems to, like, she got cancelled by like queer people. She seemed to have some level of regret for like how much more radical and insane shit is now. But I guess it depends on your view, because she kind of dropped out of doing this kind of content quite a long time ago now.
According to Blanchard, trans women are driven to transition primarily by sexual motivations. He didn't really bother to think about trans men or non-binary people, so you all are excused. You can just grab a beer and...
Well, he didn't bother, or just that's not what the theory's about. I don't know.
laugh it up. Blanchard claims that trans women can be divided into two types of men. And yeah, I know, just hold your objections for the end. The first type are the homosexual transsexuals. These gay boys cannot get enough dick, and who can blame them? Essentially, the homosexual transsexuals are naturally effeminate gay men who transition because, one, society is more accepting of them.
Pre-op debate with Blair. I didn't know. I haven't seen it. I have a feeling I would probably lean towards Blair White, but then, like, even if she was, like, right about stuff, I think, like, ContraPoints was, like, super nervous and shit and sounded like, you know, on edge. Oh, yeah, how was your interview? I completely forgot. I'm so sorry.
Them as women than as very effeminate men, and two, becoming women is a good sexual strategy for them since they do better as women in the heterosexual dating market than as male femmes in the mask-for-mask dominated gay scene. The second type of trans women are the autogynephilic transsexuals. These inscrutable perverts can apparently get off just by looking in the mirror.
Yeah, so it's like we're not exactly representing it in a very scientific way already.
Blanchard describes autogynephiles as straight, bi, or self-avowed asexual men. It doesn't really matter because their primary sexual orientation is misdirected inward, leading to paraphilic sexual arousal at the thought of being or becoming women, which is their true motivation to transition. Now, I'm going to argue that this theory is wrong, but first I want to acknowledge that there does seem to be some observational validity to the claim that trans women tend to fall into one of two clusters of correlated traits. I'll replace the stigmatizing terms homosexual, transsexual, and autogynephile with more neutral language. Let's say cluster A and cluster B. Cluster A trans women are mostly androphilic, that is, attracted to men. They transition relatively early in life and are very effeminate as children. Cluster B trans women are mostly gynephilic, attracted to women, transition relatively later in life, and have outwardly boyish childhoods. When I first thought about this typology, it initially seemed pretty valid. I went through the mental list of trans women I know and found I could pretty easily sort them. Cluster A, cluster A, cluster...
Oh god, I don't know. I don't know, I feel like I'm too nice to people like Wolfie, maybe, but I'm not sure. To be fair, when someone like comes at me initially, like someone like that does, it's going to take a long time for me to like start treating them like anyone else in the thing. The debate was sad. Contra was... Yeah, it was probably pretty shit. Like, the only debate I saw Natalie in was a completely different one that was, like, one with loads of people in it, including, like, Destiny and, like, Fuentes and stuff.
cluster B, but as I've thought about it more, it's partially unraveled. Without even leaving my circle of acquaintances, I can think of a trans woman who followed all the cluster A patterns but now dates women, and a trans woman who followed all the cluster B patterns but now exclusively dates men. So while I think there may really be two genuine trends here, I interpret them merely as correlation clusters that get fuzzy around the edges. Blanchard, however, takes homosexual transsexuals and autogynephiles to be two sharply distinct types, with two completely different psychosexual motivations to transition. And this is what I strongly disagree with, the notion that male homosexual strategy or autogynephilic lust are the primary motivations to transition, and I have a lot of backup here.
I think it's so interesting how contra literally will borderline represent the other arguments better than theirs. Well, the problem there is the arguments on contra's side are typically not very good. And unfortunately, we do a lot of cope to justify being women that were born as like males. And I just don't see the need to do so anymore. It's like lifting a weight off my shoulders, honestly. Like, just being like, yeah, who fucking cares anymore? Like, why do I have to construct this alternate reality in which, like, I'm a female because I say so? I can just be like, yeah, I'm a male. I transitioned to female, trans woman, whatever. It's just so much easier. Like, so much less of this would be, like, necessary. But hey, I don't know.
Here, since trans women almost universally reject this characterization of their experience. Now, you'd think that'd be a major problem for the theory, but fortunately, Blanchard has an airtight response to that, namely, that trans women who disagree with him are fucking liars. I mean, that's really the scientific ideal, isn't it? A theory that can't be falsified. It's perfect.
Well, that's very much literally trans as well, so, this is the problem. For me, like, I would treat AGP similarly to something like gender dysphoria, which is much more of like a best guess, if that makes sense, because it's, you know, it's fucking theory. It's not meant to be, this is literally perfectly how it works. Even gender dysphoria is kind of, it's people's best guess as to what the fuck is going on with like trans people, right? So I don't know. I definitely give autogynephilia more merit than Natalie does straight away.
Blanchard has an airtight response to that, namely, that trans women who disagree with him are fucking liars. I mean, that's really the scientific.
And that's the problem, like, some of them probably are lying. Like, you can't really get around that because it's so, trans shit is so based on, like, you know, testimonial, which I'm not saying isn't useful, but you never really know who's being honest. And, you know, the problem we have is our shit is just as much unfalsifiable as AGP and any number of other things, in fact.
Scientific ideal, isn't it? A theory that can't be falsified. It's perfect. 3. The man who would be queen. Blanchard's theory likely would have been glanced at by a handful of sexologists before fading into the endless sea of forgotten academic publications had it not been given a major publicity boost by J. Michael Bailey.
Weakest form of evidence. Yeah, like, one thing I've noticed with trans media, like, they did this with the cast review where it was like, well, you can't really, like, do double-blind trials and stuff. And now you're saying that all our evidence that doesn't do that because you can't is like bad. And like, to me, surely the point is like, we shouldn't accept low quality evidence just because you can't get better evidence. That just sounds like this is the best we can do, you know?
Bailey, a Northwestern psychology professor who endorsed Blanchard's theory in a 2003 pop science book titled The Man Who Would Be Queen. Great cover, Bailey. Very controversial, very provocative, very politically incorrect. I have been triggered. Well done. Now, Bailey, I read your book, which, considering how much I enjoy your cream, was just amazingly bad. The Man Who Would Be Queen is a frightening book for trans women because it's acutely transphobic but also kind of vivid and well written, and it introduced a wide audience to Blanchard's typology. The first two parts of the book describe homosexual transsexuals, including Bailey's and his male research assistant's observations that they're super fuckable and natural-born sex workers.
I start upstairs to get the panoramic view and I see Kim for the first time on the stairs dancing, posing. She is spectacular.
I'm very I wasn't as primed when I used to watch this kind of stuff to be kind of cynical of the way this kind of stuff gets framed. Because it's clear that she doesn't like this book, and now we've got someone else reading it in, like, music and shit. Like, you know, we're getting shown like a tiny part of it, but given a lot of opinions on it, if that makes sense. I think I can see why like this kind of stuff brought me in so much, you know. I don't understand why you need evidence. Well, I mean, shit, like, the thing about it being an internal feeling is that if you then need like healthcare and you need other shit and then you have rights based on it, yeah, you should probably like show what it is, right? Oh, thank you, Mega Rat. Yeah, I've always been like 1 foot in and 1 foot out with the cult stuff. Like I always felt like ContraPoints was, and I don't know if that's true or not, but I don't know. I'm done like coping. I'm done feeling like I'm just pretending and shit like that. It's just so much easier. The book about this book, Galileo's Middle Finger. Okay, I'll have to have a look in that. Yeah, it's, well, let's keep going. Maybe it'll, yeah.
Exotic.
I find out later that she is from Belize.
And sexy. Her body is incredibly curvaceous.
Which is a clue that it may not be natural.
And I notice a very subtle and not unattractive angularity of the face, which is also
Not clearly diagnostic.
on this tall siren. It is difficult to avoid viewing Kim from two perspectives,
As a researcher, but
also as a single heterosexual man.
Wow, Bailey.
The cast report was a whitewash. How so?
Great science writing. When he's done drooling all over the homosexual transsexuals, Bailey moves on to the autogynephilic transsexuals, focusing almost entirely on a single case study of a trans woman he calls Cher, whose backstory is a stomach-churning nightmare of autoerotic mania and transvestic masturbation. Bailey describes how Cher made videos of herself wearing female masks and vaginal prostheses while receiving anal sex from a sex robot of her own construction, all to the accompaniment of a Donna Summer's album and the moaning audio from a porno film. It honestly sounds like something I would do in a video as a joke. So well done, Bailey. You found an honest-to-God pervert. And look, as a performance artist, I love this sex robot. I admire it, I want it in my life. But as a transsexual, I mean, Bailey, this has nothing to do with being trans. You just found a person who built a sex robot. That's not how Bailey sees it, though. He upholds Cher as an exemplary case of an autogynephilic transsexual, claiming that Cher's sexual fetishism is typical of the motivations of all trans women who aren't exclusively attracted to men. So Bailey's telling.
So yeah, she's cynical of that. I'm glad to hear that, but have we really been given that much reason why? I mean, I don't know. It doesn't sound like something I'd really want to read that much, but I don't know. Maybe I should have skipped the book review portion. I don't actually remember this video that well, to be fair.
Is that autogynephiles are these unfeminine male masturbators showing up to gender clinics with bogus stories of how they always knew they were women in order to get genital reassignment surgery to satisfy their paraphilia.
Well, this is the problem. First of all, yeah, of course there's going to be people that like exaggerate, but second of all, like people practically tell each other to exaggerate and lie about their backstory. So it's like, I don't know how you can pretend that's not happening. Maybe it was easier 6 years ago, but then you have to remember like how much of our shit has really evolved in that time, you know? This was like the best we had, and it kind of still is, unfortunately, which is kind of a damning indictment of this shit, you know? Wish she wouldn't be such a TRA. Yeah, that's the thing. Like, she had other videos that were like, kind of almost like internal conversations, like talking about like trans issues and like representation and like more politicized kind of thinking and stuff. And that kind of stuff I found really interesting.
Now, what's striking about this to me is even for a defense of Blanchard's theory, Bailey's account is more lurid and grotesque than it needs to be. Bailey likes to think of himself as a dangerous libertine philosopher, pursuing the light of truth wherever it may lead, unrestrained by conventional morality and political correctness alike. You're so filthy. But what does the unrestrained pursuit of truth look like? What objective methodologies does Bailey employ? Well, for the most part, it seems like he just goes to gay bars in Chicago and chats up trans women, turning these stories into case studies for his book. Sounds like an awful lot of fun for scientific research. You need a
It's not a very scientific approach, but is there like no merit to talking to these people? I don't understand. Like, does it have to be either or? Like, we can criticize someone's approach, and fair enough. But like, hang on. But it's like we because we find this one problem, we just kind of use the criticism and then leave it there. And it's like, oh, okay, this is debunked then, I guess, when it really kind of isn't. But I don't know, I guess it makes you think a certain way if you're listening to someone like this as an authority in some way, because they've made these like videos and stuff. Which, you know, I'm interested in their perspectives, but so far, like videos like this, it feels a bit more like reading from the script, and it's just an older version that wasn't quite as messed up as the one we have now.
and turning these stories into case studies for his book. Sounds like an awful lot of fun for scientific research. You need a research assistant, Bailey? The Man Who Would Be Queen is filled with sentences like,
there is no way to say this as sensitively as I would prefer, so I'll just go ahead.
all right, you edgy fuck.
Okay, that's the most straw man voice I've ever heard in my life.
Let's hear it.
Most homosexual transsexuals are much better looking than most autogynes.
But what's weird is this sounds like most bread tubers. Who is it? Oh, it's Peter Coffin. Yeah, okay, that makes sense then. Oh, and she cites Julia Serrano. Her writings seem a bit unhinged in my opinion. And then Zinnia Jones. I need to watch Zinnia Jones. I haven't really watched her yet. Genderanalysis.net. Zinnia Jones is just a YouTuber, and I don't know so much about Julia Serrano. Most of her writings kind of feel like the same captured stuff that I've been reading, but hey.
I feel like transsexual.
We appreciate the feedback, Bailey, we really do. But is this science? It's effectively a straight cis man announcing his discovery that young straight chicks are hotter than middle-aged lesbians and trying to pass it off as a valid empirical observation. And like the pop science cishet men have written over the past century regarding the nature of females and homosexuals, their observations about trans women are seriously lacking some vital perspectives. This is what we postmodernists mean when we
Wait, how can it be lacking perspectives if he was like talking to trans people at bars by your own admission?
and cishet men have written over lesbians and trying to effectively a straight cis man announcing his discovery that young straight chicks are hotter than middle-aged lesbians and trying to pass it off as a valid empirical observation.
Okay, so we're essentializing pretty hard. How nice.
And like the pop science cishet men have written over the past century regarding the nature of females and homosexuals, their observations about trans women are seriously lacking some vital perspectives. This is what we postmodernists mean when we complain that science often privileges a white cishet male perspective.
Okay, maybe this is like where we quite heavily divert, because I'm not big into postmodernism. And like, what I find is too often, like some people turn out like this and they still are able to string sentences together and make at least some good points, but then half the time you just get these fucking idiots that end up like Frida Wallace, where it's like trying to have a conversation with this person is just fucking impossible because they believe in nothing. Like nothing means anything. Is like, we should try less to understand the world. Okay, great. I'm just gonna go somewhere else.
It's not that I hate men or male sexuality, I just hate that the male sexual perspective is so powerful that it gets to call itself science. It's not
Yeah, and is that like, what's the word I'm looking for? Conspiratorial, maybe?
sexuality, I just hate that the male sexual perspective is so powerful that it gets to call itself science.
That's like super soy.
It's not that there is no objective truth, it's that this represents a very narrow window on it. Would it
Well, so does any like study, so does any like piece of research. And here's the thing, like trans people, like pro-trans, like TRA, whatever types. Oh, hey, Fivefall, how you doing? A proud postmodernism. Me neither, like especially not nowadays, Jesus Christ. What was I saying?
science? It's not that there is no objective truth, it's that this represents a very narrow window on it.
Yeah, you could say that about any of the things that like trans people put down as like trump cards. Like, it seems like a lot of TRAs like fucking, they'll find any like study that seems to support their view, and then like they'll slap them down as like these trump cards and shit. Like, it seems like the same shit in my opinion. And, you know, I guess this isn't one of the videos where she criticized the TRAs. She has other ones where she does, but unfortunately, either this is kind of a smokescreen or it's just aged horribly, where trans people maybe were a bit more normal in 2018 and nowadays they do all the same shit that you're complaining about, you know?
Wouldn't anyone care to hear a different perspective? Well, how about mine?
I mean, he asked people their perspectives, did he not? Asked trans people like what they thought and they told him. I think, yeah, like ultimately is being written by a white cis man or whatever shit, but like, I don't know, we just pretend. It's like when people talk about like how the Kaz review had like nothing to do with like trans people when they consulted fucking shit tons of people from what I know.
4. My perspective. From my perspective, Michael Bailey is a lecherous edgelord. He's a man who, when I was a student at
I was still on this, Jesus Christ.
Northwestern, was mostly famous for the fuck saw incident. Google it. Of course, that doesn't mean that the fundamental claims of his book aren't true. Even if we could prove that Bailey gets together every weekend with Blanchard to sacrifice a trans baby to Beelzebub, it would still have no bearing on the scientific correctness of the theory, which might still be true. The problem is, it isn't true, which I'll argue at length in a moment. But first, it's worth noting that the theory has gained acceptance among a non-trivial number of academics and journalists, largely because 1, it's often presented.
Yeah, Frida Wallace is at least like entertaining. There's a lot of like dourness in like trans circles, and I can't exactly talk because I'm extremely low key and I'm not very excitable, or like, you know, I'm kind of the opposite. But yeah, like fucking hell. She's mostly funny when she's making a fool of herself, and at that point it's just kind of sad in a way.
Presented as the only supposedly scientific alternative to mushy platitudes about women born in men's bodies, and 2, many trans women have reacted to Bailey and Blanchard with extreme vitriol and personal attacks, resulting in the widespread perception that a bunch of triggered PC cucks are throwing a narcissistic male entitlement temper tantrum because Bailey and Blanchard accurately called them out as paraphilic fetishists. In her 2015 book Galileo's Middle Finger, bioethicist Alice Drager championed Bailey as the undeserving victim of a hysterical SJW lynch mob, but she gets so caught up in exonerating Bailey of the personal accusations against him and in telling a bigger story about academic freedom and how scientists are being silenced by PC cucks that she doesn't bother to.
Well, isn't that kind of an important point? Isn't that kind of an important, like, we see this and it's part of a bigger point? Like, what's wrong with that?
Check how good Bailey's science really is, and ends up affirming the autogynephilia theory herself. Now, I'm certainly not going to deny that trans people on the internet can sometimes, and ends up scientists are being silenced by PC cucks that she doesn't bother to check how good Bailey's science really is, and ends up affirming the autogynephilia theory herself. Now, I'm certainly not.
I mean, I'd have to look into it. I don't know about that.
Going to deny that trans people on the internet can sometimes behave like a bit of an angry mob. In fact,
sometimes. This was pre-cancellation as well, so I don't know. She's been cancelled many, many times by like queer freaks on the internet. And this is why I'd rather just get the cancelling out the way. If I need to say mean shit about people until the fucking uber woke freaks fucking go away, then I'll do that, because I just don't want that kind of audience. I don't want to constantly be having to apologize for saying this or that wrong. Oh no, I misgendered this one person at 4 hours and 38 minutes of my live, you know what I mean? Shit like that. I just, like, fuck all that shit. I don't want that. I don't want it. I don't want people to control the way I speak, so.
In fact, I may be on the receiving end of one of those myself in about, 20 minutes, depending on how this video is received. But there's not exactly a shortage of sleazy passive aggression from the Blanchard and Bailey camp either. Blanchard is known to seek out and comment on pornography made by his detractors, and Blanchard and Bailey camp either. Blanchard is.
I mean, is there no relevance to, like... I mean, if someone was criticizing my theories and it's like they're a wannabe porn star as well, I don't know. Like, I don't know. Satana Kennedy. I'm not looking it up, like, disgusting. I know what she looks like. I don't know. Listen, I hate all this, like, OnlyFans porn kind of stuff. Like, just miss me with it. It's fine if you do it. It's fine if you like it. Just miss me with it. I love how BroTubers have no real friends. Yeah. They all hate each other. It's like when Vorsh and, like, his little cabal, like, all broke up, like Xanderhal and Demon Mama and all that. But yeah, I don't know. I don't expect too much from anyone. That's kind of how I go into it. He gets pissed up and bragged about her dick. I was in Frida. Yeah. Crazy motherfucker. In front of a room of feminists. I honestly don't get it. Trans people in Spain, in pain specifically about their genitals. AGPs enjoy their genitals. Do they always? Like, I don't think AGP is, like, nullified by surgery. I think you can be an AGP and want to get the surgery, and it's probably a lot more immersive dressing up as a woman, like, looking at yourself in the mirror. It probably helps to some people. And for most people that get vaginoplasties, as far as I know, they still get, like, sensation and stuff, you know? So I don't see why it would need to be. Yeah, I don't know that it would need to be that, if that makes sense. I don't know. My brain is dying. I've seen too many trans people on the internet today.
Is known to seek out and comment on pornography made by his detractors, and Drager is an
What is this? Is all just like shit flinging. Like, yeah, both sides fucking shit fling. And you've just been like, well, the trans people are mean too, but so are these people. And I'm going to actually show you the other people's like meanness. I'm not going to show you any of the trans people telling people to kill themselves, because, you know, that would be too much. Does Contra do anything occasionally show up on Matt Bernstein's podcast anymore? I'm not sure. I've seen the odd like interview. I haven't watched anything because I don't really watch her anymore. I don't know. That Matt Bernstein guy really like weirds me out. He seems insane. Like I would not want to. I would not want to associate with someone like that myself. But I haven't. To be fair, I haven't watched him. It's mostly I just see his tweets and I think I can figure out an awful lot of this person just from that, you know.
Advocate for the narcissistic rage theory of trans backlash against Bailey. Remember, according to autogynephilia theory, many trans women are erotically fixated on themselves, from which a dishonest person can make a conceptual leap to saying that they're narcissists, and hence any trans...
Well, whether it's dishonest or not depends on the individual, right? Like, is she justifying this at all?
...themselves, from which a dishonest person can make a conceptual leap to saying that they're narcissists.
And plenty of trans people are narcissists, by the way. Like... I'm sorry, the whole gender identity thing, some of it feels like so narcissistic to me. Like the idea, like what we do, all sit around and like discuss our identities. Like I can think of nothing that sounds more like narcissistic. And whenever there's like some kind of clash, no one seems to understand each other. It's just, well, I have this identity, I'm this, that, and the other, so I'm more important, and you're the one that's wrong. It's just, I don't know, it's just child shit. It is like narcissistic, some of it.
And hence any trans woman who raises her voice in this conversation is accused of exhibiting narcissistic rage emanating from her wounded male ego. Furthermore...
Yep, and if you're a trans person that says anything out of line with like the fucking cult ideology shit, whatever it is, you get the exact same shit, just from your own people, and you spend a bunch of your life wondering what the fuck you did. I don't know. I mean, I know what I do. I say things that aren't the right things, and that's just how it is. It's become a cult as much as anything else. I will say it didn't seem as culty in 2018, but hey, I had my head in the sand for a long time, and I didn't engage with loads of stuff that maybe I should have, and that goes for both sides really, because I was just too willing to take like trans people's like words on stuff when I should have been listening a lot more closely and thinking for myself.
Like so many other professors in recent academic freedom controversies, Blanchard and Bailey being ruthlessly silenced by...
Never encountered as many people with narcissistic personality traits that hang out with queer people. Yeah, it's weird. Like, I started noticing it with like people I knew in real life. It's the same, like pretty much, I don't know, as someone saying about a backstory. I don't know if they're talking about mine or someone else's, but for me, like, I pretty much snapped when like I realized that it's not just crazy people on the internet doing this weird like trans cult thing, but it's like people I know as well. And a lot of them seem like the most like narcissistic fucking people ever as well. Like the way they engage me, like people literally calling me like privileged from their bigger houses where they have a bigger car parked outside. And it's like, are you fucking serious? I don't know.
By PC cucks has not really interfered with their academic careers, nor their continued authority to misrepresent people with less power than them. This is of course assuming that autogynephilia really is a misrepresentation of trans women.
Punching down, we love it. You know what happened from punching down? You know what happened to the discourse because of punching down? Now these fucking trans people think they can go around being complete shitbags to literally everyone, and everyone else should just shut up and take it because they're more privileged than the trans shitbags shitting on everyone, which is ridiculous. Like, you can't just give certain groups the ability to fucking hate on everyone else with impunity. That's insane. But that's what we want, you know?
And that's really the crux of this whole drama, isn't it? So let's just leave the drama behind and dive right into that question, pursuing...
Why even bring it up then? Who cares? Like, let's talk about the thing.
The pure light of truth, as we always do on this channel, relying only on the facts, the figures, the scientific studies.
Now that we've poisoned the well a whole bunch, gotcha.
Just kidding. If you really want to read a scientific argument against autogynephilia, read Julia Serrano's article, The Case...
Julia Serrano, are we calling her scientific? I've read a couple of things by her. I don't know if I'd describe her as particularly scientific. Gender identity is distinct from their sexual... What's scientific about that fucking statement? I don't fucking know. everything I've read by Julia Serrano, like I've not been blown away, let's be honest.
Case against autogynephilia, which pretty much
Born in the wrong body. Well, yeah, the problem is people like me who have been trans a bit longer used to say that kind of stuff like metaphorically, and then other people started coming on saying it literally, and now people are like, now that they're saying it literally, it's like, well, no, like they're pushing back against it. You can't make it up.
sums it up.
Someone who wants to be perceived as the opposite sex.
Against autogynephilia, read Julia Serrano's article, The Case Against Autogynephilia, which pretty much sums it up. Because I know that you didn't click on this video because you wanted to hear about science. You came here because you wanted filth. And I'll give you filth, Bailey. I know that's what you want. And I want to give you... 5. The false dichotomy. Filth is...
I define a trans person as someone with gender dysphoria. To me, it's like gender dysphoria plus like intent, or are already like the wheels are already in motion, if that makes sense.
Coming, don't worry, but before we get there, there's one more thing we need to discuss. Advocates of Blanchard's theory pretty much unanimously introduce it as if it were the only possible alternative to what's called the feminine essence theory. The feminine essence theory says that trans women are female souls in male bodies, that we are women from birth to death, and that transition is merely an effort to make our accidental exterior match our essential interior. People like Drager will tell you that trans activists dogmatically
See, they even make fun of that, like, Jesus, there is a lot of like et tu contra in this video. Because like, you say trans activist, what are we supposed to fucking say? Because I'm never trying to talk about all trans people. I'm trying to talk about like the specific like kind of trans people that are pushing all this kind of shit. But it's like whatever you say, like you get fucking chat on. It's really annoying.
Adhere to this theory, and that anyone who challenges it will be pursued by a ruthless witch hunt. And of course, the only way to challenge it, we are told, is to defer to
Wait.
Tell you that trans activists dogmatically adhere to this theory, and that anyone who challenges it will be pursued by a ruthless witch hunt.
This is true. Is this not true? Is she trying to say that this isn't fucking true? This is the most true thing I've ever fucking heard in my life.
And of course, the only way to challenge it, we are told, is to defer to Blanchard's
I'd be willing to bet it's not the only way. I'd be willing to bet it's more of, this is one way, and this is a way that gets silenced or something. I don't know. This feels, I hate saying these kind of words, but this feels like just bad faith.
Typology of homosexual and autogynephilic transsexuals. Now, I object to this framing of the discussion.
A lot of this mentality of I was bullied, so therefore I've become the biggest bully myself. Exactly. Fucking true.
Because I don't believe in Blanchard's typology or the feminine essence theory. There is no feminine singularity that made me a woman from birth. I wasn't born a woman. I was born a fucking baby, just like
a male baby.
Everyone else. There's no such thing as a feminine essence or masculine.
Yeah, see, I don't know. She was a bit less ridiculous than people like nowadays, I guess.
Theory. There is no feminine singularity that made me a woman from birth. I wasn't born a woman. I was born a fucking baby, just like everyone else. There's no such thing as a feminine essence or masculine essence. There's only biology, habitual behavior, and the way society responds to you, all of which can be changed quite a lot, and all of which are currently changing for me. Now, there is an emotional appeal to the feminine essence theory. I think
tribal yeah, very much so.
Most people have gender essentialist intuitions, and I admit I do feel on some level that I'm supposed
to me, it's people that are trans-identified. Seems to clearly not be applicable. If you say trans, to not lump it in with the people who... Yeah, I can't do it based on identity because anyone can just call themselves anything. And it means that trans as a group comprises like so many different people that like have so many different like needs and stuff. If you say trans, to not lump in, people say you don't need dysphoria. Why don't you? That's clearly a part of the problem. Yeah, maybe, I'm not sure. I don't think identity is a good model, and we only subscribe to it pretty much so much is because you can come up with your own identity and therefore you can just tell yourself that you're right. So that seems to be where it comes from for me, but I could be wrong. Listen, hopefully I'll talk to someone who helps me understand better one day, because it's very difficult not to be cynical. And I say that because like I've known people like very publicly take on like trans identity when they've changed nothing about themselves. They identify as non-binary now. Like, I can't see that person as trans just because they say they're trans and they have he, they fucking pronouns now when they're female, you know? There's a bit more to it than that. Like, if you want to call yourself non-binary, fucking knock yourself out, but that's not the same thing to me.
Chose to be a woman by nature, and in a sense that may be true. I don't think I chose to be trans, and it seems likely that there's something inherent in my biology or psychology
Well, you did. I mean, everyone does.
that led me to transition, but that's not quite the same thing as essential womanhood, which intellectually I
And this I agree with. See, I'm you know, we're fair here. I'm not trying to shit on anyone. Like, for me, it feels like a compulsion that I don't really know the source of, and I just feel better in some ways. I don't know. I've gone over and back over it so many times. I'm even starting to just like, I don't even fucking know. It's just some shit that I did, you know. It's gotten to that point, I think.
don't think makes sense. I think it's heartwarming gibberish. But there is also, I think, a legitimate role in the discourse for heartwarming gibberish. Sometimes you have to explain what it means to be trans to a person who believes that dogs go to heaven. And in most circumstances, saying I'm a female soul in a male body gets the point across. Not all language.
I don't think it's because they respect their identity, fair enough. I think it's because the most meaningful way of grouping it. Yeah, maybe, I don't know. I think sort of separating like transsexual from non-binary and more kind of identity kind of stuff, I think that's probably a better way. Have I had a violent hate crime? I have not been violently hate crime, no.
Language is philosophical. It's a lot easier to explain what being trans is in essentialist terms. To explain it without gender essentialism, it requires a whole complicated philosophical discussion that...
Oh, if you asked that multiple times, I'm sorry, I don't check chat as much as I should. I'm so sorry. No, I have not been violently hate crimed. I've had like shit shouted at me from windows of vans. I've had the odd guy have a go at me, usually to the back of my head as I'm walking away from them. And I don't care about that shit because who gives a fuck what someone like that who does that kind of shit thinks? You know what I mean? Especially when they're that weak that they have to do it when they're in a car that's going away from me.
most people simply aren't up to having. But the useful platitudes become a problem when more analytically minded people start putting these things under the microscope, and then they end up concluding that trans people are just fetishists who are telling lies about themselves. So you're probably wondering, if I'm not a fetishist and not essentially a woman, then why am I transitioning? Well, I keep saying this, but dysphoria really was the primary reason, and shortly before I transitioned, I made a whole...
Well, you know, it's the best theory we have, possibly. Depends who you talk to.
Video about that if you're curious. You have to keep in mind that transitioning is not just for the bedroom. When you decide you're going to live as a woman, you have to do that at the grocery store and on airplanes and at Thanksgiving dinner with your family if you even...
Oop, not anymore. You can just phase in and out of being a woman if that's what you want to do, and anyone that has a problem with that is a thought criminal.
And still have a family. It's kind of hard for me to imagine why someone would do that just to gratify a masturbatory urge. That said, is there some sexual aspect of being transgender? Well, of course there goddamn is. How can an adult decide to switch genders without there being some connection to sexuality? The problem is, autogynephilia is not a good description of that connection in most cases, and it certainly isn't in my case. But I'm a 29-year-old transsexual.
Isn't that what they all say? That's the problem. I don't think that I really relate to it either, but at the same time, it's like, well, isn't that what they all say? So I don't know. You're always going to be a bit fucked on that one, unfortunately.
With a history of dating women and cross-dressing in erotic situations, no less. According to Blanchard's theory, I'm therefore an autogynephile. It seems that I have some explaining to do. Well, here's where the filth comes in. 6. Contrapoints in erotic life.
Hang on. I have answered the question, though.
Come one, come all to the gender circus with your host, Natalie. Step right up, you filthy freaks. One of the reasons it's difficult for trans women to refute Blanchard's theory is that even arguing against it from your own experience is incredibly humiliating and degrading and invalidating. Fortunately, I have no sense of self-respect or dignity whatsoever, so I'm willing to take one for the team here. Get your clipboards out, gentlemen. I want to make this as easy as possible for the psychoanalysts at home. I was born in 1988. As a small child, I was not especially feminine nor especially masculine. I was not interested in sports and was just kind of physically inept. My main childhood interest was music, and I learned several instruments. In early adolescence, I was misdiagnosed with OCD, the primary symptoms being spending too much time in the shower and spending too much time styling my hair. My sexual development was kind of late. I never masturbated till I was 15, and I didn't fantasize about having sex with women or with men or even about becoming a woman. My fantasies were kind of platonic almost. I would sort of fantasize about women, but in a very abstract kind of way. An early romantic disappointment involved my realization that women would never be attracted to me in the same way that I was attracted to them. In my late teens and early 20s, I was a long-haired, smooth-chested androgyne, which suited me well. It was around then that I first cross-dressed, when a woman I was seeing asked if she could dress me up in her clothes and do my makeup.
We've had quite a lot of similar experiences. I think that's a good part of why I kind of latched onto her content a lot.
God, yes, I said. Throughout my 20s, I was...
I mean, I will maintain to anyone that, like, latching onto someone like contrapoints, like, there's way worse content you could have been, like, really, really getting into. Like Philosophy Tube, for example, you know.
On and off in relationships where there was this feminization dynamic. More women are into feminizing boys than you might think. When I was feminized, we would just make out and not do anything penetrative, but just sort of little proto-lesbian things, you know? Now, some women I was with were not into that, and some would practically lock their underwear drawers when they found out I'd done it in the past. There was one period where I cut my hair short and quit that altogether, but it didn't last more than a couple years. When I had regular heterosexual sex, it was like my soul had to leave my body in order for me to get the poison out, which is how I thought of it. The cross-dressing was never a solo or a masturbatory activity. There was always a partner, or sometimes several partners. Bailey, are you paying attention to this? This is for you. What I liked about it was the way that dressing like a woman changed the way partners interacted with my body, how they would kind of treat me like a woman.
Yeah, stop listening to other people's anecdotes and listen to mine.
I fully acknowledge that a lot of the feminization was pretty fetishistic. There was a lot of short dresses and thigh highs, and occasionally also a BDSM submissive aspect.
She's more of an AGP than me. I've never worn thigh highs. I don't think I've worn mini skirts, really. Yeah, I win. Huh.
But over time I realized that the fetish aspect wasn't really what I liked about it. It wasn't humiliating for me to be feminized, it was affirming. And one day I kind of realized that I didn't want to be feminized at all. I wanted to be feminine. In my mid-20s, I first started really paying attention to trans women and thinking about transitioning myself, but I thought that since I didn't feel like a woman, that I never would, and I thought that I would never pass and that I would just be a hideous parody of womanhood. Then about a year ago, thanks to this amazing online queer community that we have now, I started developing more positive thinking about this. I've always looked a little bit younger than my age, but last year I also started noticing the first signs that I was going to age into the body of an older man, and that triggered really intense gender dysphoria. At the same time, I realized that I would have to transition to have any hope of a genuinely fulfilling sex life. And at that point...
Alright, let's calm down a bit. Itching the think. My response to you is I've not been violently hate crimed. I don't know if you wanna let me know what the next part of that was.
The need to transition felt so urgent that I could not wait. So I got internet hormones from the Republic of Vanuatu, and I started taking those in August until I could get a prescription.
Yeah, he's done criticisms of her. What's his name? King Critical has done a lot as well. I try not to watch too many critiques of stuff that I used to watch, because I'd rather watch them again myself first and think about what I think without sort of getting ideas put in my head, if that makes sense. Because, like, this is something, I've probably seen this video a whole bunch of times, but it was all, you know, generally, like, years ago.
From an informed consent clinic, and since then, my life has drastically changed. I live as a woman full-time now, and most of the changes aren't sexual, but the hormones certainly do have sexual effects. I now find myself attracted to both women and men, and the mere visual image of a woman no longer turns me on the way it did. Instead, I need there to be a certain kind
Trans lesbian now, by the way.
of interpersonal connection. I don't masturbate at all, and I haven't come in months. Someone, please fuck me. I guess the critical thing is that I've been wearing women's clothes, my clothes, for 7 consecutive months, and I have been turned on by it for 0% of the time. So the idea that I'm some kind of transvestic fetishist is ridiculous. And I'm not turned on by the mere idea of having a...
But yeah, so far, I'm gonna guess, I guess a lot of his critiques for this would be that it's not being represented that well, and that there's reasons why it would include her. For example, the stuff he was saying about, like, romantic feeling towards oneself as a woman rather than sexual. Maybe, yeah. I don't know. I probably off stream I'll do some reading and stuff.
a female body either. I mean, when there's developments, I'll check it out, but I'm not like, oh yeah, I have tits now, that's so hot. I mean, it's kind of hot, but it's more about other people being into it than it is about me being into it. So as always, my sex drive is directed outward at other people. The sexual aspect of my transsexuality is not about the target of lust being directed inward. It's about me wanting my sexual encounters to occur from the standpoint of a female body, or, you know, at least as close as I can get. And since I started hormones, it's about my sexual desires coming from this psychologically female place of vague bisexual interest activated by interpersonal connection, rather than intense object-oriented male lust. So that...
The other thing is, how often do people overanalyze their lives so much that it kind of warps, if that makes sense? Oh, King Critical. I like King Critical. I don't agree with him all the time again, but I like his videos.
That's my attempt to describe my sexual history without resorting to politically correct cuckoldry or trans ideology. Now, I've read enough Blanchard to know that this description in no way lets me off the hook for autogynephilia. In fact, I'm what Blanchard would call a classic case of pseudo-bisexual behavioral autogynephilia. Pseudo-bisexual because, of course, all trans women's experiences are lies, and because, according to Blanchard, I only like guys because being filled up...
Yeah, so we're like, I don't know, this essentializing thing. This is what people fucking do all the time. Like, you'll say something and they'll just take the most insane version of it. Like, there's been the odd person in my chat that hopefully aren't coming back anymore because I blocked a couple of people. Like...
because, of course, all trans women's experiences are lies.
You know what I mean? Like, why do we always do this? Do we have to? It's so annoying. It's so annoying, like, putting a thought out there and having someone take it to fucking space and then scream at me from that when I'm like, that's got nothing to do with what I'm saying. Like, we don't have to find a way of, like, essentializing fucking everything, you know? Okay, that's fine. Just chill. Like, no one's in danger. Everyone's cool. Just it's fine. Don't worry about it.
And because, according to Blanchard, I only like guys because being filled up with their dicks makes...
Alright, so I didn't know if there was like a follow-up to whether I've been violently hate crimed or not, because I think some people probably will ask me that kind of thing to try and suggest that my perspective is less important than other people's, because I've been treated to that kind of thing loads of times. I'm not saying you are, but it happens a lot.
Makes me feel like a girl, which is what I'm really into. And behavioral because Blanchard describes different kinds of autogynephilia, like anatomic, transvestic, behavioral, and physiological, according to what she supposedly fetishizes. And I'm turned on by sexually behaving like a woman, rather than simply wearing female clothes or having female anatomy. And I mean, okay, you can slap a Greek word on anything and make it sound scary, fake, and pathological, but I think this is an especially unfair way to characterize my experience, and here's why. 7. Autophilia in general. I'm guessing that most people would be pretty reluctant to admit that they take any kind of sexual interest in their own bodies. It's sort of like...
Yeah, so she's made an argument that I have, which is that people aren't going to admit to it, which is fair enough, but that doesn't debunk it. That's more of an issue with getting people to take it on, especially trans people.
It's like admitting that you enjoy your own body odor. Ew. But how unusual is it to check yourself out, to take some sexual interest in the sight or touch of your own body? I've noticed that cis men seem to really like their own penises, and taking pictures of their penises and sending them to other people. Does that make them auto-androphiles?
Well, no, because they're sending them to other people. Like, are they getting hard whilst doing it? Then maybe, but I think there's probably a lot more things to consider. Like, I don't know. These people exist. Are they this? It's like, there's not an argument unless it makes any sense, and I don't get this.
Are they behavioral autophallophiles? I can make up Greek words too, Blanchard. I know a cis woman who, having just bought some expensive lingerie, told me, it's not for men, it's for me. What does that mean? It means she enjoyed wearing sexy lingerie under her clothes because it made her feel hot. Is that...
Well, that's what she's telling you.
Cisvestic autogynephilia? Likewise, I used to date cis women, I know what they do, and I can tell you that women touching their own breasts during sex or while masturbating is not at all uncommon. Is that anatomical?
I really don't know about this.
Autogynephilia? Twitter user Nathan of Oz pointed out that in the October 2017 issue of Cosmo, an article on self-love tips recommends that it's apparently cis female readers try stroking their own feet or running a feather over their skin as a prelude to kneeling in front of a full-length mirror and rubbing one out, possibly while squatting on a dildo. Can you imagine the level of paraphilic male fetishism that would be read into this if it was written by a trans woman? I mean, it's one step away from filming yourself.
Was trans Twitter like this in 2018? Because it's like that now. Not hard to find trans people talking about their cocks. And the thing is, like, obviously it makes a difference if we're talking about someone going into a different sex than just someone being their own sex. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I need to think about that more.
Fucking a sex robot. And okay, Cosmo's sex advice is often ludicrous, but the point is, it seems like it's only when it comes to trans women that we feel the need to whip out the suffix philia. It seems what's going on here is a lot of...
Yeah, I don't know. Conspiracy, trying to make it kind of victim-y. I don't see the point in that point at all.
Pathologizing of normal female sexuality when it exists in trans women. But of course that raises the question, what is normal female sexuality? 8. Normal female sexuality. Switching from male to female hormones causes your sex drive to be completely obliterated and then regrown in new form, which came as more of a relief to me than I expected. I don't think I realized the extent to which my own sexuality felt like a demonic possession or alien infection until I was free of it, thank God. When I had male hormones in me, I needed to have an orgasm like every day. I was turned on mainly by visual arousal cues. I was at a Kinsey 1 relative to my birth sex, and I had a couple mild, typical, straight guy paraphilic kinks. No, not autogynephilia. On female hormones, I initially had no sex drive at all, but have started developing very different patterns of arousal. For instance, I never need to have an orgasm. I'm turned on mainly by interpersonal cues like intimate physical contact or close emotional moments. I'm at around a 70-30 attraction to women versus men, and the
Changing gender is different in 1988 than today. Yeah, of course, yeah. I mean, hey, it was pretty different back in 2015 to what it's like today. Like, things were just starting to get weird when I transitioned.
paraphilic kinks have vanished without a trace. Oh, by the way, for the pharmacologists at home, this is 6 milligrams estradiol and 200 milligrams spironolactone daily. So my interpretation of all this is that I have what is a pretty typical female sexuality, at least for a girl who's into girls. I don't feel like I have some
Is this typical or like stereotypical? Especially because you've never had a female sexuality. You've never had an experience of female sexuality because you're not a female, surely.
attraction to women versus men, and the paraphilic kinks have vanished without a trace. Oh, by the way, for the pharmacologists at home, this is 6 milligrams estradiol and 200 milligrams spironolactone daily. So my interpretation of all this is that I have what is a pretty typical female sexuality.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd agree with that. Like, stereotypical maybe. It's different to what it used to be. Does that mean it's female? You know.
At least for a girl who's into girls. I don't feel like I have some essentially male pseudo-bisexual behavioral
about getting fucked as a woman. See, I was under the impression it's the idea or image of yourself as a woman, like seeing yourself, like imagining shit, I don't know.
Gynephilia. One of the reasons why Blanchard has to come up with elaborate terminology like this is he takes as foundational the presupposition that trans women are psychologically more like cis men than cis women. His studies therefore lack a cis female control group, meaning he didn't bother to apply his autogynephilia survey to cis women. But if he had, as Charles Moser did in 2009, he might have found that many of them were classified as autogynephilic. Blanchard's insistence on classifying trans Charles Moser did in 2009, he might have
Questionnaire distributed sample of 51. 29 were responded for return for analysis. So 29 people. Just saying.
Meaning he didn't bother to apply his autogynephilia survey to cis women. But if he had, as Charles Moser did in 2009, he might have found that many of them were classified as autogynephilic.
Many of them. 25 people. The thing's theorizing subtypes of AGP. I have not seen that. It's probably something I'd want to look into, though, for sure.
Blanchard's insistence on classifying trans women's sexuality as a variant on male sexuality makes it seem paraphilic and unusual that trans women want to have sex as women. But what do cis women want to have sex as? Walruses? I mean, no judgments. This also explains his claim that non-exclusively androphilic trans women are pseudo-bisexual.
Moses' research is bad quality. The questionnaire is not assessing the same construct. Yeah, of course. I mean, he only got 29 responses. That's not very much. That's a heck of a small group to generalize on as well.
Sexual, because their attraction to men does not resemble gay male attraction to men. The idea is that these trans women's attraction to men is not based on raw physical lust, so it is therefore unlike gay male attraction to men, and is therefore pseudo. That is, it's really an autogynephilic fantasy where the man is just a prop. But what about straight cis women's attraction to men? Is that based on raw physical lust for the male body? I mean, sometimes it probably.
So paraphilia, meaning sexual fetish. Ever hear of Andrea Chu? It's about getting fucked as a female. I don't know, everything that's been explaining it to me so far has not said that it's about getting fucked. Like, I don't know who Andrea Chu is, that's like one person. In principle, everyone should have access to exchanging medical care, regardless of age. Jesus fucking Christ. But now parents must learn to treat kids as what they are. Human beings capable of freedom, and that's why kids can't drink, is it? Is that why kids can't drive until a certain age, is it? Good argument. Well, yeah, she might be an autogynephile, and it might be forgetting about getting fucked for her. But why does that mean that autogynephilia is about that when I've watched a lot of stuff that seems to be suggesting otherwise, and that's just one possible way?
Probably is, and I'm not a cis woman, so I can't really say. But I kind of suspect that cis female heterosexuality is not best described as raw physical lust for the male body. That is, I suspect it's quite different.
I'm like, I believe that AGP exists. I think when we get into the typology stuff, it does seem very reductive. But I mean, to me, it's just another theory. It's similar to gender dysphoria in that way, because, you know, it's someone's best guess based on what they've been able to study. I don't know how seriously I take it, really.
Different from cis male homosexuality, if I may risk painting with broad strokes. Take the case of Playgirl magazine, which at its peak published feminist articles alongside naked hunks, but never had the circulation of its male counterpart, and later on ended up just being read by gay men. From the perspective of female sexuality, I mean, men's bodies are nice, they have great hands, great abs, great this part, it's all great. But it's not that great. And if you read pornography written by women, and notice that it's usually written and not photographed, you don't find a predominant focus on vivid descriptions of male bodies. Like in 50 Shades of Grey, which I read for research purposes, there's some description of Christian's hot body.
So if it's not about sexual fetish, I think you're misunderstanding. I'm saying that, yeah, it seems to be about like sexual arousal or whatever, the concept of yourself as a woman or like the image or whatever. But it's not necessarily about getting fucked as a woman. It's about being, if that makes sense. I mean, if it wasn't about being a woman, then why would it be being applied to like trans people? Like whether it's real or not, to them, it's about like being a woman as much as they can be.
And his hot abs.
Like a fetish doesn't have to be something that's literally like a sex act. You might have a fetish for like feet. Like they don't exist for like sex and that, you know.
But it's not the main thing by any means. There's a lot more sentences like, to the right is an imposing U-shaped sofa that could seat 10 adults comfortably. It faces a state-of-the-art stainless steel, or maybe platinum for all I know, modern fireplace. Near the kitchen area, in front of the glass wall, is a dining table surrounded by 16 chairs. And tucked in the corner is a full-sized, shiny
50 Shades of Shit. Listen, I've never read it. I've heard descriptions of some of the plot and stuff, and I have no interest in doing that. Kind of diminishes people's experience. Yeah, somewhat. Like, I'm not sure really. You don't need to be a fetishist to be AGP. Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm being suggested. Like, to me, that means that the name is not great in that case because of what it means. And I do think it needs like a rebrand because like trans people aren't going to take that on.
black grand piano. Here, he hands me a glass of wine. Even the glasses are rich, heavy, contemporary crystal. It's like a Crate and Barrel catalog. I'm getting so wet. Christian is established as a man of good taste, as evinced by his contemporary crystal, his playing Bach at the piano, and that's hot.
Have you liked the stream? You should consider liking the stream. A foot fetish is sexual, even if feet do other things and may few other uses. Yeah, but what I was saying is, God, we're talking past each other. I'll try and explain. Let me just see what you said before, because we're talking past each other. So you were saying it's about getting fucked as a woman, if I'm not mistaken. Like you said that that's what AGP is. For me, I don't think it's about getting fucked as a woman. It's about being one to whatever extent you can. I don't think the act of fucking is actually part of it necessarily. Especially if you're like standing in front of a mirror, like whacking one off to yourself, you know, you're not being fucked. Maybe you're imagining it. Maybe you're imagining something completely different. I don't know. So I don't think getting fucked as a woman is a good description personally.
Because it's sexy to be wanted by someone who's qualified. It's not enough to be whistled at by a catcaller. They have no discernment. I mean, they whistle at anything that looks vaguely female. They whistle at me. And I don't want to be whistled at by the...
Well, there's not gay fetishists being brought up because I guess there's not as much of a question of where being gay comes from as there are being trans. Because, I mean, hey, like, gender dysphoria is not really something you can prove. Like, you can't really nail it down to this, that, or the other and say, scientifically, we've located it. It's just a guess. Well, it's not just a guess, it's an educated guess, but, you know.
The kind of person who would whistle at me. You want to be wanted by someone who, with their exquisite and discriminating taste, selects you, the protagonist. This is not a story about Christian's rippling abs and his tight buns. It's not a story about wanting a man. It's a story about being wanted by a man. This is how the whole romance genre works. You emotionally identify with the female protagonist, then you meet the sexy bad boy who's like a pirate or the CEO of Business Incorporated, and then the hot part is just how badly this guy wants you, the protagonist, usually singling her out over other more qualified women, and eventually giving up everything he loves to settle down and make babies with her. And a lot of these stories are kind of silly. They conflate female sexuality with women's economic dependence on men in a way that's really problematic. But I fundamentally resonate with the wish to be wanted. I want other people to think I'm sexy and want to fuck me, you know? It makes me feel like I have value, and it fills up the void inside. Is that so wrong? 9. Female vanity. The art critic John Berger wrote in his book Ways of Seeing about the European oil painting trope of depicting a nude woman with a mirror and calling the painting vanity. The mirror was often used as a
I'm going to assume yes, because I don't know what the pirate porn is.
symbol of the vanity of woman. The moralizing, however, was mostly hypocritical. You painted a naked woman because you enjoyed looking at her. You put a mirror in her hand and you called the painting vanity, thus morally condemning the woman whose nakedness you had depicted for your own pleasure. The real function of the mirror was otherwise. It was to make the woman connive in treating herself as, first and foremost, a sight. The notion of the vanity of woman is a misogynistic trope that originates in male projection. It is the assumption that women enjoy looking at themselves in the same way that men enjoy looking at them, and are hence complicit in their own objectification.
My understanding is they get often seeing themselves as a pornified woman. I don't think it's necessarily even that. I don't know. I think the Ray Alex Williams video, I'd need to like read the kind of Blanchard stuff, I guess, and to see it as whether Ray Alex Williams is like adding in a lot of stuff or like expanding on the theory or whatever, or whether it's kind of all there, because he seemed quite clear that it's not necessarily getting off on yourself, or that being pornified is part of it. For some, it definitely is. I mean, you can definitely see trans women out there, that dress in a very fetishized way, and unfortunately it rarely kind of looks good on them, but I guess they don't consider how it would look different on a male than a female or something, but yeah.
Objectification. I think the concept of the autogynephilic transsexual woman is a combination of this trope with a homophobic trope. Misogyny casts women as narcissistic, vain, in love with themselves, and homophobia casts queer men as hypersexual perverts. The autogynephile is the ultimate combination of the two, the hypersexual pervert vainly in love with the image of himself as a woman.
Okay, so this is how we see it as offensive, I guess. Yeah. I have very little time for like discussions of like offense and stuff like that. I'd rather move past it and just talk about the actual thing.
10. Autogynephilia acceptance. So this whole video I've been treating autogynephilia kind of like an accusation from which I have to exonerate myself. And I think
The fantasy of being fucked as a female. I'm really not sure. I don't know. Maybe it would have been good if you were here earlier, but I'll end up uploading it. I've not heard a definition that's like, it's a fantasy of being fucked as a female.
I think it's justifiable considering I'm objecting to misrepresentation, but some people might wonder, isn't this whole conversation getting kind of kink-shamey? Like, is autogynephilia so wrong? Well, no, it's not. It's fine. There definitely are men who get turned on by wearing women's clothes or thinking about having a female body, and as paraphilias go, this is very harmless, and I don't think
And there's definitely ones that pretend they don't.
it's anything to be ashamed of. But the question of whether genuinely autogynephilic trans women exist is more complicated. The reason most trans women consider the label autogynephilia to be such a stigma is that, as Blanchard says, women do not get turned on merely by the thought of being women. Now, as I've discussed, the problem with Blanchard is he overextends the concept of autogynephilia to cover pretty much any sexual feeling a cluster B trans woman can have. But I'm actually inclined to agree with him that being turned on merely by the thought of being a woman is a fundamentally non-female state of mind, and one that feels quite foreign to me. So a lot of trans women, I guess including me, have the idea that you can't be both a woman and an autogynephile, hence the offense we take to being characterized in this way. However, things get messier when you look into this some more. Are there some genuinely autogynephilic transsexuals?
According to this one, it can be both a paraphilia and a sexual orientation. I don't know. I'm not seeing where you're getting it from, that it's about wanting to be fucked specifically. Everything I'm seeing suggests that it's just the idea of being one, like whether looking at yourself, whatever else. But yeah, I don't know. This is something I'm going to end up coming back to anyway, so I don't know.
Well, at first glance, the answer is yes. I mean, there's always one, isn't there? In this case, that one is Anne Lawrence, a disciple of Blanchard and self-identified autogynephilic transsexual. From 1998 to 2011, Lawrence collected 249 anonymous accounts of autogynephilia over the internet and published them in her 2012 book, Men Trapped in Men's Bodies. Great title, Anne. Very provocative, very controversial, very politically incorrect. I have been triggered. Well done. What is this cover, though? Come on, Anne. Get a statue of hermaphrodite.
See, I don't know. Do we have to do this? It's so annoying. Like, if I criticize anything that's not the ideas, there's always some person that's going to come around every now and then being like, oh, I think you said some right things, but your points are mean. You're mean to people. And it's like, we're picking on every tiny thing. Like, I said something like, contrapoints, it feels like she kind of helped build the bomb. And this is what I'm talking about. It's all this like petty shit, all these like diversions. Like, we're not talking about the cover. Like, why is this necessary?
or something on there. So this book is filled with stories of trans women who have a past or present of pretty autogynephilia-like fantasy and behavior. So what do we make of that? Well, a lot of this stuff, like fantasies of being women or having sex as women or arousal during cross-dressing, are what the trans community has destigmatizingly termed cross-sex gender fantasy. And among trans women, particularly prior to transition, this kind of thing is pretty common.
I never hear about this anymore. Cross-sex gender fantasy. So it's acknowledging it exists but rewording it? Okay. This feels like whenever we reimagine the sexes and always come out with two that often have words female and male in them.
Like fantasies of being women or having sex as women or arousal during cross-dressing are what the trans community has destigmatizingly termed cross-sex gender fantasy. And among trans women, particularly prior to transition, this kind of thing is pretty common. You'll see it all over the place on trans subreddits. There's a blog called Cross Dreamers devoted to it. It's been written about by Zinnia Jones and Julia Serrano. So within the trans community, this isn't even controversial. It's not provocative. It's not politically incorrect. But how do we make sense of this? Well, my thinking is that it's pretty hard to experience genuine female sexuality when you've still got the evil magic of testosterone in your system.
Well, can you, as for whether as a male you can ever experience female sexuality is kind of questionable, no? Yeah, someone said something like, oh, it's mostly men that I saw buying them. They're probably like presents, surely. As far as I know, it's mostly women that read that kind of thing.
So you've got to get that out, and then this paraphilic stuff tends to go away. But how is this any different from Blanchard's theory of autogynephilia? Well, basically it comes down to this. Blanchard's theory claims that cross-sex gender fantasy or arousal is causal and essential. In this theory, if you're an autogynephilic transsexual, you are essentially male, and any facsimile of womanhood you achieve can only be honestly understood as the expression of an essentially male sexual urge. I reject the idea that it's causal or essential, and I think the strongest piece of evidence that it isn't essential is that even the...
Yeah, I mean, we'd have to be talking kind of sideways to suggest that a male person can experience female sexuality. I think we're making a bit of a jump that I don't think has been whatever, yeah, justified. That's the one. I'm getting tired. I'm so sorry.
Rare trans women who identify as autogynephilic admit that after transition, the cross-sex fantasy and arousal vanishes, yet they continue to prefer living as trans women. Blanchard made this observation himself.
Any viable theory relating to the etiologies of autogynephilia and transsexualism must explain the following well-established observation. Gender dysphoria in young non-homosexual males usually appears along with or subsequent to autogynephilia. In later years, however, autogynephilic sexual arousal may diminish or disappear, while the transsexual wish remains or grows even stronger. The same conclusion is suggested by the fact that surgical castration and estrogen treatment, which decrease libido in gender dysphorics as in other men, usually have no effect on the desire to live as female or the resolve to remain in that role.
If these trans women are essentially men with a paraphilic desire to become women, why would they continue preferring to live as women after the paraphilic desires go away? Well,
is sex is paraphilia the only reason for them to trans? Possibly not. I think that's kind of what Blanchard suggested, right?
this is where things get really weird. According to Blanchard and Lawrence, the only way to explain this is to shift the goalpost and say that actually, autogynephilia isn't a paraphilia at all. It's actually a sexual orientation. So what happens when you transition is you actually pair bond with yourself, forming a kind of stale, sexless marriage with the woman you've become. And if that sounds like it doesn't make any goddamn sense at all, it's because...
Well, it sounds like it makes no sense because you reworded it in a really weird way.
Forming a kind of stale, sexless marriage with the woman you've become. And if that sounds like it doesn't make any goddamn sense at all, it's because it doesn't. A pair bond is a social relationship between two or more people. Are you saying that trans women are a man and a woman inside this? Oh, it's actually... The only way to explain this is to shift the goalpost and say that actually, autogynephilia isn't a paraphilia at all. It's actually a sexual orientation. So what happens when you...
The same conclusion is suggested by the fact that surgical castration and estrogen treatment.
Yeah, I mean, surely he's saying that it's just part of it or something. I don't know.
Which decrease libido and gender dysphorics, as in other men, usually have no effect on the desire to live as female or the resolve to remain in that role.
If these trans women are essentially men with a paraphilic desire to become women, why would they continue preferring to live as women after the paraphilic desires go away? Well, this is...
Again, there could be loads of reasons. You might find that people are nicer to you as a woman, especially if you're able to pass quite well. Male privilege isn't this all-encompassing thing that your life is automatically better if you're a male than you're a female. Although she hasn't made that argument, to be fair. I know that there are people that would. I don't know. This is quite weak. The problem is, I'm not saying there's like amazing evidence for AGP, but it's not like we're being presented with much alternative other than, well, I talk to these people, or I myself don't experience that, you know? There has to be like more. Like, it kind of sucks that it's kind of like she's arguing from quite a weak place, unfortunately. But then if you're trans, then there we go.
is where things get really weird. According to Blanchard and Lawrence, the only way to explain this is to shift the goalpost and say that actually, autogynephilia isn't a paraphilia at all. It's actually a sexual orientation. So what happens when you transition is you actually pair bond with yourself, forming a kind of stale, sexless marriage with...
I don't understand. Where's the pair bonding thing from?
Paraphilic stuff tends to go away. But how is this any different from Blanchard's theory of autogynephilia? Well, basically it comes down to this.
I can't be asked to check this.
Blanchard's theory claims, and if that sounds like it doesn't make any goddamn sense at all, it's because it doesn't. A pair bond is a social relationship between two or more people. Are you saying that trans women are a man and a woman inside this? Why do they continue falling in love with other people? I can't even start with this. This video's too long. I'm getting cranky. Look, this seems like the point
Either I missed something or I don't know what the fuck she's saying. I can't be asked to check. I'm getting tired.
where Occam's razor shuts down Blanchard's theory. Like, okay, maybe I subconsciously created a female alter ego with which my original male ego has fallen in love. But maybe lots of things. Maybe I subconsciously want to become my mother so I can fuck my father. Maybe the elder gods ripped my primordial duality in twain, and now I'm yearning for my female half. Or maybe I'm just a woman who wants someone to fuck me every once in a while. 11. True autogynephiles. Among the narratives recorded in Lawrence's book, there are admittedly a few accounts of trans women whose primary sexuality and motivation throughout their transition does appear to be genuinely autogynephilic. And I'm not going to say that these people are...
Most of them aren't autogynephilic. I think AGP exists, not all trans women AGPs. Yeah, I agree with that. And that person may well be. I'd have to look more into it. I'm honestly not very familiar. I saw one weird quote about wanting to trans everyone no matter what age and shit, and that's like, we're not on the same page, you and me, Andrea.
Or lying about their experiences.
The most donated book ever. I'm not surprised.
Because that would be a terrible thing to do. Ultimately, ContraPoints is not a channel about judging people, so I'm not going to say that these people aren't really trans. I mean, I find it weird and hard to imagine, but whatever. I'm the one who's into people licking milk off my tits. And wait till you see my sex robot. And look, if I had autogynephilic feelings, I would just tell you. I've already admitted to things in this video that I wouldn't tell my own...
Again, that's what they all say. I don't think that I'm an AGP. I don't think I have autogynephilic feelings. But that's what I would say, isn't it? Like, I'm not gonna just out and say it unless I'm really okay with opening myself up in that way, which, to be honest, I don't know why I'd lie about it if it was true, but at the same time, you know, it's not much of an argument, is it?
Diary on my deathbed, but I just don't. This theory doesn't describe my conscious motivations to transition, and that's ultimately the reason most trans women hate this theory, not because of wounded narcissism or shattered erotic delusions. We just don't like being misrepresented. But you know who...
Well, how are you supposed to generalize that, though? Because you've had that experience. Like, I don't know.
Does love this theory? She's been there literally the whole time. You know, I realize that by talking about this, I'm subjecting myself to a lot of ruthless psychoanalysis. Whether it's going to come from TERF Reddit or trans people who are mad at me for even talking about this, or who knows, maybe even Blanchard and Bailey themselves. So you know what? Why don't we just get that out of the way right now? It's time to put this tranny on trial. 12. The autogynephilia trial of ContraPoints.
Oh, the rest of it, I think. Yeah, that'll do. I'm getting tired. I want to stop anyway. Do I understand autogynephilia better? I don't fucking know.